Warning, this video contains horrible, sickly and death noises that may disturb younger listeners. You have been warned. Warning. Warning. This video contains horrible, sickly and death noises that may disturb younger listeners. You have been warned. Hey guys, it is me, giz122 here. Today, I'm reacting to Something Sweet to Bite Part 1, only for 9 minutes, and I have a timer. Oh, okay. My friend requested this. You heard the warning at the beginning, so if you're about 7 or younger, don't watch this video. Alright, let's go.
Warning. The following reading contains subject matter that some listeners might find disturbing.
Exactly.
Listener discretion is advised.
A bat flew across the face of a monstrous harvest moon, its leathery wings sweeping through the chill autumn mist, leaving swirls and spirals in its wake. The creature of the night flew back and forth, eating the last bugs of the season. Fat as it was, the bat would need every scrap of weight it could put on before the harsh winter months. Already a few of its fellows had secluded themselves in caves and hollow trees, snug and plump, lost in half-sleep that would last until spring. A moth stirred up from its grass, its gossamer wings, making it a pale ghost in the moonlight. A quick snap of tiny jaws and the mouthful was gobbled down. With a surge of its wings, the bat flew on into the night. As it neared a barn blazing with light, the creature became somewhat curious. Usually at this time of night, the barn would be empty, dark and inviting for one of its kind. Instead, the bat could hear sounds of ponies busily at work inside. It would have flown closer for a better look, but a sudden chill ran down its spine, making it think twice. An instinct that even it barely understood. Screamed louder and clearer in the bat's tiny head. Danger! Best to move on and find more prey. Best to find a safe spot and sleep in the deep, dreamless sleep of hibernation. Best to go far from here to do it. There is nothing here for a tiny bat. Nothing but death.
Okay, it's turning up. Okay.
Apple Bloom!
Called Applejack, putting the last batch of caramel apples on a tray lined with waxed paper to cool. Benches set up in the barn lined the walls, half filled with the sugar-coated fruit.
Still black.
Where has that filly gone off to?
She muttered to herself. A cauldron, half empty, but for a hissing puddle of sweet brown syrup, cooled over a pile of smoldering coals just outside the barn door. The barn itself was warm and snug, filled with lantern lights and sweet scent of sugary treats. Quite the contrast to the chilled night outside. Even so, Applejack couldn't help drawing the cool air into her lungs with a satisfied smile as she stepped out to look for her sister. She loved this time of year. Winter would be here soon enough, it was true, and that had its own work and worry, just like spring and summer. But the autumn months, after harvest, were a time of relaxation and fun for the Apple family. With the crops in, safe and sound, money would be rolling into Sweet Apple Acres before too long. It was a tradition in their family to share the wealth, and what better way than to provide all kinds of apple-themed treats and games for kiddies at Nightmare Night. Nightmare Night was the first holiday to come after the harvest, so the Apple family always did it big. Of course, the holiday had always been more about treats than tricks at Sweet Apple Acres. Every year, Granny Smith would have tubs set up in Ponyville for the townsfolk to bob for apples. She had taken to turning in early and letting Applejack make sure that they stay full and crisp, delicious apples. Even so, Granny Smith was still an important part of the festival. Every year since Big Mac was old enough to pull a plow, he'd offer hay rides for the community as well. Even Apple Bloom seemed to be taking more of an interest in the festivities. Last year she'd gone around with Pinkie Pie collecting candy with her friends, but this year she seemed to be really interested in helping Applejack make up a few homemade treats to pass out at the festival in town. A few of the recipes Apple Bloom was trying out seemed a mite odd, but Applejack didn't mind trying new things so long as they were able to finish making their batch of usual treats as well. The only problem was, after helping Applejack spare a few apples and dip them in the bubbling caramel, Apple Bloom seemed to quickly lost interest and wandered off to do her own thing. Really, Applejack shouldn't have been surprised. Apple Bloom had a habit of getting distracted by the least little thing. They should have been done making treats hours ago, but as it was, she still had about half the apples left to dip. Worse, she was running low on caramel and firewood.
Apple Bloom!
Called Applejack again as she went to the side of the barn where the woodpile was kept to get a few fresh sticks.
Wherever you run off to, get your flank back here, Missy. We got a lot of apples to dip before we store them in the barn to dry, and we're gonna burn through the midnight oil with all your diddly-daddling.
The country pony paused and listened. The fog that curled through the orchard tonight did strange things to the familiar sounds of the farm, muffling noises that Applejack would normally find comforting and amplifying those she couldn't identify. She didn't hear the sounds of tiny hoofs coming her way, nor did she hear her little sister's voice calling out in response. What she thought she heard was giggling.
What was that?
A girlish giggle, just on the edge of her hearing. It wasn't something any pony wanted to hear all alone on a dark night.
Easy, girl.
That was scary.
You're just spoofing yourself.
Applejack reassured herself under her breath as she quickly piled a few dry branches on her back for the fire. She really wished that Granny Smith didn't go to sleep so early and that Big Macintosh wasn't off in town helping set up for tomorrow's celebration. More than anything, she wished Apple Bloom would stop wandering off on her own. A farm was no place for a young filly to go exploring by herself, especially at night. Applejack had heard too many horror stories of colts playing around on farm equipment and hurting themselves. Perhaps more dreadful were the stories of fillies falling into old sinkholes or boarded up wells, no pony finding them until months later, if they found them at all. A thought suddenly occurred to Applejack as she headed back towards the front of the barn.
Apple Bloom, you better not be playing a trick on me. It ain't Nightmare Night just yet.
When there was no answer, she tried.
I'll tell Big Macintosh on you.
There was still no answer. At least, no answer she wanted to acknowledge as being more than a figment of her imagination. As she rounded the side of the barn, a sudden burst of flame whooshed into life, painting the fog bright orange. Applejack jumped back, the firewood she carried on her back scattering at her hooves. She almost bolted there and then, but calmed down when she realized the flames were under the cauldrons. Some pony had gotten a fire going again while she'd been back at the woodpile. Had Apple Bloom gone to fetch more wood and she missed her going around the other side of the barn? As Applejack grew closer, she saw whomever had built up the fire had used too much fuel. The flames were licking up the side of the cauldron, bright and hungry. Already she could see that the caramel that had been left in the pot was bubbling up. At this rate, it would burn and blacken, going completely to waste.
Oh, Apple Bloom, sweetie, you can't use this much wood. You need a low heat for this kind of treat.
She went to drag the cauldron out of the fire and save what she could of the caramel, careful to avoid the leaping and flickering flames, but found the old pot wouldn't budge. It was usually only this heavy when it was full, not half empty like it was. Applejack did the best she could, tugging on the cauldron inch by inch away from the bark. But once it was on a patch of damp dirt, she went about kicking sand over what...
These treats were for tomorrow to share with all the...
It sounded like it was coming from the cauldron, but that couldn't be right. It didn't make any sense.
I had to skip a little bit.
How could the girls be hiding in that bubbling hot mess?
I just saw
Applejack moved tentatively towards the cauldron, her eyes darting back and forth. Beyond the glow of the fire, there was nothing but darkness, mist, and fading moonlight.
See?
The smoke of partially quenched fire burned her eyes as she looked into the big black pot, ready to jump back at the first sign of a trick. She froze, her eyes locked while a sad, shriveled-up figure curled into a ball at the bottom of the pot. She was completely covered in bubbling brown sugar, but even so,
that is all I'm going to watch now. Oh wow, my timer's still going. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Wait, I'm just going to skip a little bit.
Pulling from her eyes, she backed. The giggling rose all around, bracing her burnt organs to mush. The monster, whatever it was.